spent a good part of my childhood in a town where income insecurity, poverty, and drug addiction were very common. And a lot of the kids in this town were neglected, faced abuse, or cycles of sexual abuse. For a long time, there wasn't anyone here fighting for these kids or giving them resources that they needed. It wasn't until a friend of the family opened what was called the Lighthouse, where every day during the week, she would cook meals for children to go eat after school and pack lunches for them for the next day. Some kids, including myself, relied on the Lighthouse not just for meals, but for positive relationships with older people in their lives. She didn't just provide meals, she also made sure to have art supplies, sports equipment, and clothing closets to make sure that children had a positive outlet they could go to instead of falling into the toxic cycles of addiction, teen pregnancy, and poverty we saw so often in this city. She taught me a lesson for the first time that I hold very dear to my heart today, which is that Texans always fight for each other. Historically, it's true. In the 1800s, Tejanos and white Texans worked together to help enslaved people through what was called a Southern Underground Railroad. Whether it was crossing the Rio Grande or finding another way into Mexico, Texans banded together to help people get to freedom. In the 1960s, when religious extremism spread through the country, leading to oppressive abortion bans that stripped people of their bodily autonomy, it was not just normal people fighting for this right. It was pastors, clergymen, and preachers rallying for reproductive freedom. And that happened here in Texas, in a church in Dallas, which led to a meeting where two women named Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey came together to have conversations about what they could do to bring that kind of freedom, not just to the state of Texas, but to the entire country. Those two women are the ones who would be responsible for the landmark case of Roe v. Wade, which made abortion a constitutional right in America. Texans will always come together, but sometimes it can be difficult to have hope. In recent years, our state has seen tragedy after tragedy strike. As a young Latin woman, I've lived many of my childhood years and young adult life in fear because of the events that have happened in this state. I didn't grow up in the city. I know I'm from Houston, but I didn't grow up around skyscrapers. I grew up in a very rural town, a little farmhouse. It wasn't a lot, but it was home. And one of the small joys I had was a garden that me and my dad would plant things in every season. And one day I found myself covering my little plants with tarps and blankets, preparing for a winter storm that was blowing into town. Like many Texans, I was excited at the possibility of seeing snow for the first time. I thought I'd have a chance to build a snowman. What I didn't expect was the chaos that blew into town that night. It was that night that the power went out. Before the storm had blown in, my dad had put buckets of water on the kitchen table, just in case we needed them if the pipes froze over. It was so cold in my house when I woke up the next day that those buckets of water had froze. We were lucky compared to other people. We had lost power and water, but a lot of people, hundreds of them, lost their lives. Parents trying to keep their children warm, dying of carbon monoxide poisoning, or people freezing in their homes. It was a tragedy that we experienced together. Regardless of your class or your position of power, it was traumatic. But Texans do what Texans do. The ice started to melt, the roads cleared up, and we showed each other what we all know to be true. In times of crisis, we can come together. My dad put on his boots and drove around town in his old beat-up pickup truck, fixing people's pipes, helping put boards on water damage, A business owner offered free meals to families with small children, and little old ladies brought bags of knitted blankets to churches to pass out to those who might need them. It was a traumatic experience, and as Texans, we've had our fair share of natural disasters. But unfortunately, it's not just natural disasters that we've faced. We've also faced a lot of man-made ones too. Texas has become a beacon of extremism to the country. And there's an old saying that goes, as goes Texas, so goes the nation. In recent years, that's become more apparent with harmful legislation and policy that's been put forward in this state. At this very moment, abortion is banned in the state that constitutional right was born from. And Texans don't just face an abortion ban, they face a civil bounty law where they could be prosecuted for aiding in access to abortion. Parents of transgender children face the possibility of having their children who aren't just expressing who they are taken away from them, but their other children as well, simply for unconditionally loving their child for who they are, in a time where our foster care system is overcrowded, underfunded, and overlooked. And the children who do live in their homes are constantly living in fear of gun violence and mass shootings, especially here in Texas, where 3 of the top 10 deadliest mass shootings in US history have happened in the last 6 years. Our state, our communities, our people have lived in fear. And our nation has largely written Texas off as a place where rights and liberties go to die. But that could not be farther from the truth. It's not who we are. Parents have created organizations to rally for their children's freedoms in school, whether it be to express themselves or to read the books that they choose. Communities have created contingency plans on how to help each other in the event that we face a hurricane or another storm. And courageous individuals have taken to the streets, the Capitol, and courthouses to fight and rally for rights that they believe in. We cannot forget about the history of our state because it is rich and inspiring, a state that bore civil rights icons like Barbara Jordan, the first Black woman from the South elected to the House of Representatives, a tireless fighter for voting rights, civil rights, and reform. A state where we elected change makers like Ann Richards and President Lyndon B. Johnson. Texas, a state where music, food, and culture unite us in the stories that we share so lovingly with each other. I am proud to be a Texan. I'm proud to have been born and raised in this state that my ancestors helped create. Because at the end of the day, Texans will always and have always fought for each other. Thank you.